Hello again, Year 11, and you're joining me as I create this video on a very, very late Tuesday night after having marked your paper. So one of the questions that I feel is probably, if I chose two questions and put them together to combine the marks, these 10 marks were probably the poorest answered from what I could see, probably because there was no SPAG counted. So I'm going to go through this really quickly. This is as part of your direct improvement time activities and the progress that we're going to try to get you to make during DIT. So I'm going to be showing you this video. Mr. Davis and Miss Buckley may decide to show you the video, or they may decide that they've uploaded this video for you for homework, for you to be supported on Google Classroom, but whichever way would work a treat. So first question, which was question, let me just have a look at the paper. Distinctive landscapes was the unit, obviously, but it was 2B. So if you'd want to look back at your test paper and have a look at 2B, and then the one we're going to do after that is 2C. So for a named location along the coastline, you're going to explain how one coastal landform has formed, and it's worth 4 easy marks if you have revised. Now, just going to note that people are not using the bug technique. Disappointed to see that. Box, underline, and then glance back to see if you've included the keywords in the question, and it's just not being used, or it's not being used effectively. You are asked to explain in this question, so you go through step by step, developing and explaining how your landform that you've chosen has formed, and the main key points that you're underlining here are named location and coastal landform. If you don't do both of them, you will get capped at 2 marks, and you have to talk about the formation. So the coastal landform that we're going to look at is going to be Old Harry's Rock, which is along the Jurassic coastline. You could also mention Durdle Door, and those are 2 really, really good options for you. They're both along the Jurassic coastline. You could also mention Devon. You could mention the south of the UK along the Jurassic coastline will get you your named location mark, so that would get you your PLC, or you might see that I have written named location next to anything that you've mentioned as a location. And then you're not getting yourself capped at 2 marks, coastal landforms as well. So misconceptions are that students can go through the actual process or the processes without their location, and if you do that, you are capped at 2 marks. Don't do it. Second, and it's the same for coastal landform. So if you give the processes without the location, or if you give let's say you don't actually name the type of landform, you just talk about the coastline itself. That's one thing that a lot of people did. They discussed the coastline as a whole, and this is also going to cap you at 2 marks, because you're being asked to talk about one specific landform along the coastline, not the entire thing. You're not talking about the entire Jurassic coastline and that erosion has shaped it, or that longshore drift has shaped it. It needs to be your very, very specific chosen landform, your C stack, like Old Harry's Rock or Durdle Door, being the C arch. Alright, well, this one's an arch, and Old Harry's Rock is a stack difference. Okay, we'll go to that in a second. Now, there was a number of other ways people answered the question. Some students talked about the formation of the Jurassic coastline over the years and how the rocks were laid down. Again, that was not the question that you were asked. You probably got a mark for mentioning the Jurassic coastline, but you wouldn't have gotten any marks apart from that, unless you talked about erosion shaping a specific landform, or were really specific in the discussion of your formation. So other issues, actually I think I've kind of covered all of the other issues. Let me think. That students didn't have enough, not enough processes named. And so on and so forth. Maybe the issues will come back to me as we look at this. But some students discussed places that were very far away from their actual name, like somebody talked about some landform up in that was in Wales when it was actually a completely different name. So just be careful with your names. Examiners are aware of the names of these locations. Now, there's going to be a section in the DIT, and your teachers, if they're showing you this video in class, they may want to pause and ask you to annotate this diagram with the 3 steps that are being that we're looking at. I'm actually not including these 2 pieces of the landform, or of the series of landforms that we can see here, the stump and the wave platform. So just the 1, 2, and 3 steps here that you could easily get your 4 marks after you've named your coastline. Okay, so you can you may have restarted the video now, and the steps that you would have got would have been: air gets into the rock of the headland. So you've mentioned the headland starts off as that, which is the area jutting out from the bay or sticking out from the bay. There's 2 headlands, one on either side of the bay. Air gets into the rock, forms crack. After this happens, it widens into a cave, and eventually the cave will widen into an arch. What will happen then is further weathering and erosion are going to, and hydraulic action and abrasion. Obviously, those are the things that have formed the cave, but they're also going to be what create the collapse, and the collapse is what's going to lead to a stack being left alone here, and your stack is your Old Harry's Rock. Okay, so the collapse leaves a stack further out into the ocean, further out into the sea. And that's the formation of your stack. Very, very simple. If you want to discuss the formation of an arch, you might want to give a little bit of extra detail and leave out that bit about the stack. There you go. So that's a very, very simple 4 marks, and just surprising that so many students didn't get the marks for that. We went over that quite extensively. So I hope that this can help everybody to achieve those 4 marks. Now, I'm going to address this next question. Sorry, wrong PowerPoint there, but I'm going to address the next question, and it's 2C. For a named river basin you have studied, describe how human activities have helped to increase and reduce the risk of flooding. I'm going to bug the question again. You're describing, you are not evaluating. No AO3 skills, no evaluation. We have done a version of this, but you could see that here we were trying to test you and see if you could respond to this question effectively and not evaluate, essentially, and just describe and then explain, because it says describe how. So you are expected to develop your points. So you're looking at AO1, knowledge, AO2 skills, which is going to be your development of your ideas and development of how there is going to be an increase or a reduction in the risk of flooding. And you need to really know your human activities for this along your named river basin. If we went back to the misconceptions, they're exactly the same here for the previous question. People did not name a river basin for in many examples. And you'll see on your DIT sheet that it does highlight that there are, it highlights up here that one of the misconceptions was that some people mentioned that the Jubilee River is the main river basin. It's not. The River Thames is the basin, and the artificial channel diverting water to Raisbury and Staines is the Jubilee River. Okay. Now, your teachers might want to pause at this point here and let you fill in this mind map. It shouldn't take you very long. Mind map your answer. What human activities can you remember, and can you recall numerical or literal data for them? Okay, and you've probably restarted the video, so we're just going to mind map and see what you came up with. Sorry, late at night, bit tired. So here we go. So we're just going to mind map human activities along the River Thames that increase or reduce the risk of flooding, and I will just put an arrow up if it increases the risk, and I'll put an arrow down if it reduces the risk. So one of the things was the Thames Barrier. The Thames Barrier prevents the tidal flow from the River Thames, which is coming from the channel between England and France, and that water normally, without the Thames Barrier, would flood central London. But what happens is that they put the barrier up, obviously a couple of times a day. Sometimes they have to close it, and when they have to close it, that can lead to an increase in water on the side that we're on, kind of near Woolwich and Barking. And it reduces the level of the water on the other side, closer to central London. Some people mix those two things up, which is one of the misconceptions for this question. So the Thames Barrier is a human activity that you can refer to. Another human activity or human construction was the Jubilee River, which I mentioned previously there. This is an artificial river channel. It was originally intended to divert water away from places like Eton. I just spelled that for you. And it actually diverted water along this artificial channel towards places like Wraysbury and Staines. And those two locations, which are named on your DIT sheet, are going to be the places that receive an increased risk of flooding, whereas the reduced risk of flooding is in places like Eton, and the other places are not coming to me, but you might remember them. So there's an increased and a decreased risk of flooding here. There's a mostly a reduced risk of flooding from the Thames Barrier. Another process that we could mention here, and that I didn't see a lot of people mention, I don't think I saw anybody mention, was urbanisation. Urbanisation being that cities themselves are huge contributors to the level of flooding that will occur, regardless of the level of climate change that we're seeing happening every day now, basically. Urbanisation and deforestation are some of our major concerns. Removal of trees and building of sewage systems that don't deal with water effectively, building of land that basically doesn't have anywhere for the water to flow, so it flows to its near water source and floods a river, and that river will flood the local areas. That is significantly increasing the risk of flooding. Okay. Couple more ideas hopefully we can get here. We've got our Barking and Woolwich Riverside. We know that they have an increased risk of flooding, but that is deliberately done. Obviously they're on the side of the barrier that they're not being helped by the Thames Barrier. So Barking and Woolwich are increasing the risk of flooding by allowing flooding to happen naturally. But what they do is, to counteract that, they build their apartments. Most people will live above the first floor, so reducing the risk of flooding to those places, but potentially experiencing a lot of flooding, for example, in the reception areas of those apartment buildings, and of course all of the homes that are being built in Barking and Woolwich. I'm running out of time here, so I'm gonna leave it at those four. You may well have come up with a few other ones, but this would be enough information for your answer. It's only worth 6 marks. How would you write this answer? I'm just going to take the last. We could combine Thames Barrier and Woolwich. We'll put them together, and Barking as well. So point, after you've made your link sentence where you've stated, using the keywords from the question, that human activities such as the Thames Barrier, Jubilee River, urbanisation, deforestation and allowing flooding to happen naturally along the Thames River basin have reduced or increased the risk of flooding. Our point, I'm going to use a P structure here, so point, evidence and link. Point is going to be that along the River Thames you've got barriers such as the Thames Barrier, and you can give the dates down here. What are your dates for the creation of the barrier? When has the barrier flooded? So when was it flooded? When was it constructed even? Other information, other numerical data that you can refer to here would be, for example, the 1950-1960s floods, the 2012 floods, I want to say. My dates are terrible, but most recent floods and the most devastating floods, which were in the 1950s. You're going to explain that for example, that sometimes the barrier fails. It does generally reduces risk of flooding from the tidal river, so reduces risk of tidal water flooding central London. You can refer to how it works, the mechanisms that literally create a big bridge across the River Thames and so on and so forth, help to reduce the risk of flooding. So that would be a very simple structure for you. Again, we'll go through that in the DIT sheet, so I hope it goes well for you.